What's up, everybody? Ben Razzie here for Awesemo.com, and we are back with more NFL offseason props, betting, everything in between. We've got a lot of things to talk about. We've been going through some team awards, some sleepers and whatnot, but the thing that we're going to hit on today is player props. Where are these guys going to be? Will they go over or under their yardage total, their touchdowns? There are a ton of props on the board across various sites. To do that, I am joined, as I always am, by Matt Gajeski, ready to break these all down. Matt, I know when we talk in the offseason, a lot of the, defensive player of the year, MVP, it's fun to talk about them, but to me, the biggest value, the biggest edges is found in player props.
I think so too. You're projecting a full game season for just one player rather than a full market of players. And one thing I really like to do in the season-long prop market is look at a lot of these unders. They're usually projected for full 17-game seasons, which don't account for injuries or, a team like the Chiefs, they might be looking at sitting their players later in the season. When that's not taken into account, I think there is an edge on the unders for a lot of these props.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm going to sound kind of counterintuitive because I'm not going to lie. I actually have a couple overs for this video, but in general, I do look to some of the unders, as you mentioned. I think in the public likes to go over with most of their bets. People want to cheer for points. I'm a sicko. I like unders. I like, 6-4 games, all safeties, just no points whatsoever. But we're not going to really talk about that today. I'm going to have you kick things off. I've been starting videos, but where do you see yourself going to start the player props?
Yeah, and when you look at overs, I'm looking for changing situations, maybe buy lows for players coming off injuries. And that's where I want to start with Odell Beckham for the Cleveland Browns. His yardage prop is listed at 925.5 yards. You're not laying pretty bad juice on this. It's just 115 or around there, depending on the books. And you look at Odell Beckham's career, he's basically been over 1,000 receiving yards in every single year he's been healthy. You look at his market share stats with Cleveland, he's easily their leader in not only targets, he had a 22% target share when healthy, but air yards as well. He was up around 33%. This Cleveland Browns team doesn't throw the ball at the highest rate in the NFL, but they are a team that's projected for 10.5 wins. So we're expecting them to move the ball offensively. So I like Odell Beckham as a buy low. And these are the situations I'm looking for when taking overs in the season-long prop market.
Listen, I have no problem. I'm high, as scary as it is to say, I'm very high on the Browns in general. I do think they have got all the pieces this year. No real excuses. I'm going to stick in the AFC North, and I'm going to a guy that if you've watched me in the DFS videos over the years, you know this is one of my favorite players in the league, Joe Mixon. Just a guy that can't seem to stay healthy. But as you mentioned, when you do look for overs, maybe coming off injuries, maybe buy low spots, that's exactly what we have here for his rushing yardage prop. Over 995.5 yards, minus 130, minus 125 I saw out there. In that range, I'm pretty comfortable with anything in there. I think this is a spot. We've seen it a couple years. When he is healthy, if he plays, 14, 15, 16, 17 games, to me, he's clearing this number pretty comfortably. You look at the situation in Cincinnati, they've really bolstered the offense. They've got, of course, Burrow at quarterback. They've got now Chase and Higgins and Boyd on the outside. A lot of weapons to cover. I feel like Mixon is the lost guy, and this is a guy that I really do believe in the talent, and it seems like everything, obviously he had a very, very bad situation in college and whatnot, but he's stayed out of trouble for the most part in the NFL. And if he can just stay healthy, I think we're really primed to see a big year for him. Now, I worry a little about Cincinnati's offensive line. I'm not going to bring Penny Sewell into this conversation, but I do wish they bolstered that front for him because he does have some trouble just having holes for him. But if the volume is there in terms of the carries, and the volume is there in terms of the games played, this is a guy, even though he does catch the ball pretty well, I still think on the ground specifically, he's going to...
Yeah, we're going back and we're playing the classics. I love it, Jordan Klein. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. This is the MLB sort of live-ish before lockish. I'm Eric Lindquist. I think that's probably the right way to put it here. We're going to be covering the 5-game early slate because there are some massive contests, specifically looking at that $18 over on DK. A lot of good stuff over on FanDuel as well. They've got a split slate. We'll try our best to be able to cover everything that we can over there. I know Adam's looking forward to that very, very much, but that's Adam Scherer on the one side, the hottest MLB DFS player on planet Earth. Adam, how you doing, my dude?
Doing pretty well. Excited for I really like these like split slates with 5 games early, 6 or 7 late. It's just fun having baseball during the day, so pretty excited.
Oh, you mean you'd like to put more action in play during the course of a day than just one slate?
Yeah, I enjoy it.
Oh, okay, that makes some sense to me too. It's really kind of a nice treat. I think more so when the Twins were good. It was nice to have morning baseball out here on the West Coast. You wake up at 9, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, you're watching Twins games and on your phone, hanging out, doing whatever. It's a beautiful thing, but yeah, we should probably get to it. We're going to have plenty of time. Let's be serious here. We've got 58 minutes to cover 5 games. We should be able to do such things. As everybody's rolling in, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. I don't ask for much, but what I do ask for are likes. That's probably the best thing that you can do to be able to help us so that we can continue to do what we do here. And we're sponsored today by OddsShopper, the #1 place that you need to go if you have sports betting that is legal in your state, or, shmashmada.com. That would be another amazing spot to go. Definitely be checking out OddsShopper because you can shop lines. You can find the best prices for whatever it is. And, if other books do not have those prices, maybe don't be putting those into play because you're hurting your expected return over a long period of time. But let's get to it. I'm ready to talk some baseball. How about you?
Yeah, same here.
Let's do it. All right. Right off the bat here, I should probably refresh my sheet. That's a good idea. Boston -129 at Detroit, 10 total runs. Detroit didn't completely break a slate. That was exciting to me. But also I didn't win money yesterday, so I don't really know what to say about that. Martin Perez on one side here for Boston. Detroit on the other side, Tariq Skubal. We've seen him a lot. We know that he can be somebody who gives up a lot of hard contact. We also know that he can generate strikeouts. This is a freaky spot, and I think this slate sets up really, really nicely. We have a lot of large implied team totals. I believe Washington 3.9, Arizona at 4. Those are really your only ones underneath 4.5 total implied runs. That makes it a very, very fun slate for offense. You're trying to figure out what to do with pitchers. But let's start with Martin Perez, because then I know Skubal's a fun talking point. But what are you seeing from him? Do you have any viability on a with 10 starting pitchers to be going his direction?
Yeah, I mean, with there only being 10 starting pitchers on the slate and some of them, 2 of them pitching in cores, others just not being very good in general, I do have some interest in Perez just because he's $6,700. He's facing the Tigers, who are at best a middle of the road offense, probably worse, although they have been decent lately. Perez is typically just not a pitcher I roster because the strikeout percentage isn't there. But with this slate being a little bit smaller, I do have a little bit of interest in him. Certainly nothing that I'm overly excited about, but he's only getting 8.5% ownership on DraftKings right now, 16% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate. So at least some mild interest there, unless the ownership increases.
Yeah, the ownership, if that takes any kind of a jump, that becomes kind of an easy eject button, I think. But yeah, as I said, he's cheap. He's 6,700. That has to be at least somewhat viable on this slate. I think that the top pitchers really kind of stick out. And so we've got to kind of find a couple pivots here in larger field stuff in under 10,000 entries in that $18. But still, I digress. Most tournaments are going to have that people are playing for these large fields. They're going to be right around 10,000 entries. And I think having a little bit of him as it stands right now against a Detroit team that sure has been better of late, but can still K at a pretty decent rate is an all right thing to do. On the other side, Tariq's, go ahead.
I was gonna say with Perez, basically what I'm looking at in terms of whether he's getting enough ownership, you're kind of looking at this whole group, I think, of Skubal, Dylan Bundy, Perez, Senzatella, Spencer Howard, to a lesser extent Arrieta too. But basically right now, we just have like all the ownership in that group going to Dylan Bundy and Tariq Skubal. I think there's a pretty good chance that flattens out a bit as we get closer to lock. But if it doesn't, Dylan Bundy has basically all of the same concerns Martin Perez has as far as just not being a very good pitcher. He shouldn't be getting 5 times the ownership in that price range. And then, you also have 25% going to Skubal for 600 more. So that's kind of what I'm basing it off of. I think that Bundy and Perez are very similar. So if one of them's getting drastically less ownership than the other, I'm just going to roll the dice on the other one.
Yeah, my early pitching analysis this morning, and I have it just on my yellow sheet over here, is Dylan Bundy WTF. So yep. I think that's probably my stand that I'm looking at here. Not to be giving you guys a super close preview, because again, we're going game by game. We want to go through everything, but the Dylan Bundy thing is definitely concerning to me. I understand why it's happening. All you have to do is look at this Texas Rangers lineup, and it's not hard to understand it, but I'm right there with you where I think Martin Perez, he should not be 1/5 of the ownership. Tariq Skubal, though, on the other side here, talk about a scary spot here. 25.8% ownership pulling right now over on DK. And again, we know 504 expected slugging, 270 expected batting average, 45% hard hit percentage, gives high contact to 16.6 degree launch angles. So if balls are getting hit, they're getting hit high and far, but the 26% K percentage kind of makes up for a lot here. What are you planning to do with him? Because this is a freaky spot.
Yeah, I mean, the way ownership looks right now, I'm more inclined to get to the Red Sox bats. I think Skubal, it makes sense for him to get some ownership because the strikeout numbers are so good this year. And when you compare him to that other group of guys that I mentioned, they just don't offer the same strikeout upside. But if around a quarter of the field is going to roster a pitcher who against right-handed hitters this year has allowed a 259 expected ISO and a 373 expected WOBA, and he's facing a team that has Kike Hernandez, JD Martinez, Xander Bogaerts, Hunter Renfroe. Granted, the lineup is a little bit more watered down than usual, but it's still just a really, dangerous lineup for the most part. I'm more inclined to go to the opposite side, especially when you also look at the top stack tool, and Boston has the highest top stack percentage among teams that are projected to go under owned, the highest top stack percentage outside of Coors Field. So the way it looks right now, I understand why Skubal's getting the ownership. If he were getting like 10% or 12% or something like that, I'd be really interested. But if the ownership's going to be there on him, I'm just a lot more likely to go to a bunch of different combinations of Red Sox.
Well, yeah, and we're getting positive leverage on them as it stands right now. Again, we are 2 hours out from lock, so be cognizant of that here. We are doing the live before lock show. I am positive that is what we're doing, but at the same time, we have that confirmed lineup, and it looks. I mean, Kevin Plawecki, I guess, being in the 6 hole. Who's missing in this Boston lineup?
That's what I was trying to figure out. So Vasquez is out. I guess it's just Vasquez, right?
Yeah, I guess
it's
so.
Just,
For whatever reason,
weird.
it just looks so weird when you see Kevin Plawecki.
Duran.
Oh, Duran. Okay. So yeah. Lefty on left. They've been going back and forth. Sometimes he's like in the 8 hole there, or sometimes he's leading off. So left on left, that would make some sense that he's going there. Verdugo getting the bump there. Bobby Dahlbeck back in, and Marwin Gonzalez is active here. So that's the other kind of funky thing on the back end that is there. He's 2K. There's always viability to that, but I can't with Marwin Gonzalez. He is dust. Let's talk bats on the Detroit side then too. Martin Perez. Yeah, we have our concerns with him as well. I mean, 456 expected slugging, giving up nearly 42% hard hit percentage as well. Not nearly as hard as Skubal, but I mean, again, this is just everything with a grain of salt. This is a Detroit Tigers lineup that has been better of late. If they're not going to be coming in with ownership, that would be one thing, but it looks as though, where did I just have that? Yeah, it looks like they're coming in with about flat ownership. I could see getting to a little bit here. What about you?
Yeah, one thing that will really impact how much Detroit I play is what ends up happening with Martin Perez's ownership. So not only is that going to affect how much Perez I roster, it's going to affect how much Detroit I roster, because right now, looking at the top stacks tool, Detroit is pretty much middle of the pack in terms of top stack percentage. They're 4th from the bottom on 10-game slate. Ownership is about where it should be given that. So looking at those numbers, there's nothing that's really going to move me towards Detroit. But if Martin Perez were to go from being 8% owned to, let's say, 20% owned or something like that, then you're getting leverage on 20% of the field by going to Detroit against a pretty mediocre pitcher. So Perez's ownership will have a big impact on what I do with the Tigers. Individually, I think the guys that you're really looking to are Jonathan Scope, hitting second at 4,500, Eric Haas batting cleanup at 5K. Since the start of the 2019 season, Scope has a 200 expected ISO against left-handed pitching. So far in 94 plate appearances, Haas has a 318 expected ISO against lefties. You also, can always look to a cheap Robbie Grossman, who's made some pretty big improvements over the last couple of years offensively. But I think that Scope and Haas are the guys that really, really stand out.
Anything else from this game for you?
No.
Okay, cool. Betting you, Reed. Oh my goodness. My gosh. We have a betting you. Oh, that's great. You guys should all be checking that out because it's Matt Gajewski. It's Ben Rasa. It's my two dudes. It's fantastic. They talk everything college football. They talk everything that has to do with it right now. And it's coming up sooner than you'd think. And I would say it's probably my highest ROI sport to be betting. And all I do is just tail those two dudes. That's what I've been doing for years, and it's gone pretty well for me. I think it'll go great for you too. And they talk you through everything on the college football betting platform. So check out the episodes of Betting You. That is the podcast. They have episodes available, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So go check them out today. Also, if you're just joining us now, hit that like button. We've got almost 250 people talking baseball here, 812 out here on the West Coast. I don't get up just for the heck of it. I love being able to help people. I love being able to make some money here together. So hit that like button. Goes a long way for us here. And we've got some free stuff that we're going to be rewarding you guys with for hitting that like button, or whether or not you want to, I guess is one thing that's kind of a moot point. But we have NFL projections because tonight is the Hall of Fame game. And I will be doing a live before lock with Matt Gajewski leading up to the lock of that 7:15 p.m. Eastern time. So right after the MLB live before lock, he and I will be going on talking everything about the Cowboys-Steelers game, the Hall of Fame game. We have preseason football back, which again, is another great sport to be getting into. Check out articles that we'll be having coming out. I'll have a betting article here this afternoon as well. Definitely be on the lookout for all of that. It's great to have football back. It is officially here. And it's been 2 years since we've been able to sweat a little preseason NFL, and it is really, really fun. And I would say probably if you know what you're doing, if you know what you're looking for, one of the better sports you can play in DFS where there's still a pretty noticeable edge. So be on the lookout for that as well. Let's see. Oh, and the preseason projections for that. 100% free. They will not be free going forward, but you want to be taking advantage of that today. Let's go to Los Angeles Angels -106 at Texas here. As I was alluding to, the Dylan Bundy WTF. I understand he is 6.2K, but this is not the normal Dylan Bundy that we've been looking at in years past. This guy just gives up hard contact for the most. Well, actually, the hard contact isn't the issue. 451 expected slugging, not getting the Ks nearly at the rate once upon a time, 21.3% here on the season. And it's just not very good here. And why is he getting 40+% ownership other than this Texas Rangers lineup? Adam, what are we doing with this number? Because this is irrational.
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I really think it changes between now and lock, because I think that this is it's a fine spot for Bundy. I understand why you would roster him on this particular slate. He's 6,200. He threw 72 pitches in his last start. They had said he was going to be limited to around 60. So seeing him go well beyond that is good to see. And if he's pitching well, I assume he's getting 80, 85 pitches or so here. It makes sense to roster Dylan Bundy. It just doesn't make sense to roster him 5 times as often as you're rostering Martin Perez, because they are essentially the same thing here. A little bit different pitchers in terms of Bundy has more strikeout upside and has a lot more issues with home runs. Perez lower strikeout upside, but not as likely to get absolutely blown up. The Twins or the Tigers and the Rangers have identical 4.6 implied run totals. It's just a very similar spot. There's no reason for Bundy to be getting way more ownership than Perez. So that's kind of what is the issue for me here. It's not that people are rostering Bundy. I think it makes sense. If those two are going to combine for 50% ownership, it makes sense to me that it would be like 25 a piece or something like that. But it just shouldn't be a lot more going to Bundy, because I don't think the range of outcomes is really any different. And that's reflected in the top stack or in the top pitchers tool. Dylan Bundy, a 17.8% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. Martin Perez, 16.1%. Why would Bundy be getting 5 times the ownership?
So Charlie grew up in chat. He says Bundy could shred Texas. Yes, he could shred Texas. A lot of pitchers, I think, could theoretically shred Texas, but what's the cost? And this is what I think the interesting talking point is with him, Adam. compared to the rest of the field here, when somebody like this is getting 43, 45%, I think a lot of players, they get uncomfortable to fade them because they don't want it to make or break their day. Do you kind of agree with that? They look at something like this and they think he's quote unquote safe. And if he sinks, everybody else sinks with him. But isn't it a little counterintuitive? Shouldn't you be kind of spreading out amongst the other pitchers and just kind of taking the leverage there?
Yeah. And to what he said, Bundy could absolutely shred Texas. But when you're trying to win DFS tournaments, you have to think beyond that, because you're not just trying to make the highest projected team you can. You're trying to beat the people that you're playing against. And if, for the sake of this conversation, we assume the ownership projection is correct on Bundy and he's getting 43%, you're just not giving yourself any sort of an advantage to winning a tournament by rostering a guy that has the same range of outcomes as several other pitchers on this slate that are just getting a fraction of that ownership. So it's not that you just, if you're, let's say you're playing 150 lineups, it's not that you necessarily just play zero Bundy, but you can come in way under the field there, say get, 20%, be around half the field. And then you have 20% exposure to get overweight on Perez, to get overweight on Senzatella, other guys that are very risky options, but that certainly could have a good game here. So, again, it's just, when you're talking tournaments specifically, you have to just look beyond, he could do well against Texas. He absolutely could. But it really just comes down to the ownership. And again, assuming that ownership does come down and gets a lot closer to Perez, then I think being around the field on Monday makes sense, because there are bats to pay up for on this slate. It is a good matchup. And, at times we do see strikeout upside from Bundy, but with the ownership as currently projected, it just, to me, makes no sense.
Yep, I'm right there with you. It's scary. He then after said, 45%. I'm good on that. Yep. There you go, Charlie. Way to come on over. He's just getting up in the morning. We're all just getting up in the morning. No worries, my dude. It was just a good talking point to be able to go on about, because you're looking at somebody who's winning tournaments every single day over there. And so going into Adam's process, I mean, this guy is, he's in fuego, I think would be the right way of saying it. I don't have an interesting, funny way of putting that. That was not funny at all. Let's go. Texas. On the other side of it, we've got Spencer Howard. This is Spencer with a C, Howard. So that's better rather than the Spencer with an S, which is stupid, but here we are. His parents can't spell. Spencer, what are we, is this even remotely viable whatsoever? I'm looking at the top pitchers tool, and underneath 1%, is he going to go far enough to be viable?
So we did just get an ownership update. Bundy has already dropped from 43 to 34%. I think that probably just continues happening until lock. But just, beyond that, Spencer Howard's kind of interesting to me because I think he has better stuff than Bundy or Perez. The matchup against the Angels is okay. Ohtani obviously is a really good hitter. Fletcher's tough to strike out, but you get some Ks with Upton, with Stassi, with Brandon Marsh being in there. Joe Adell, if he's in the lineup, Ks at a ridiculous rate. The issue with Howard is he just hasn't been going deep into games. 45 pitches his last start. 42 pitches before that. That was back. Those were both back with Philadelphia.
Yep.
But we don't know how much Texas is going to stretch him out. One thing that is noticeable from his time in Philadelphia is that his velocity did drop off quite a bit, once he got into innings 4, 5, 6. So you could expect the effectiveness to potentially drop off as well. Basically, the point here, though, is that there is a pretty wide range of outcomes. There's uncertainty here on Howard because we don't know how far Texas is going to let him go into the game. He is one of the top pitching prospects in baseball. He has good stuff. He's just had issues maintaining it for more than 1 or 1.5 times through the order. Fangraphs has him ranked as the 56th prospect in baseball, number 1 in the Rangers system. So there is upside for him there. In his 28 1/3 innings in the majors this year, he has a 24.4% strikeout percentage. He struck out 32.9% at AAA this year. So if we were to get confirmation that Howard is going to be treated as an actual starting pitcher here, I'd have interest at 5,500. It's just that without that confirmation, it's tough to roster a guy that you're expecting to pitch 3 innings.
Agreed. And we see this at Los Angeles. We don't have the Angels lineup here yet, but we can assume that we can play Shohei Ohtani as a hitter today, which is useful. Let me double check on everything. Yeah, right now, 20.5% for him. Always makes a good one-off here. I would have no issue in however much you want to get to at that ownership. But looking at the rest of this Angels lineup, what it's projected to be at least, Upton, Stassi will be back in there. They had Suzuki catching yesterday. Philip Gosselin, who I could not hate more as a baseball player or hitter here at this point in time. Batting third or batting fifth, it doesn't really matter to me. This is a tough team for me to stack up just about any single day. Jack Mayfield, has there ever been somebody who just seems like they hit a home run every single slate, but only has 6 home runs on the season? I don't know. It seems like he homers every day.
Yeah, I was thinking that yesterday when I was scrolling through my Angels stack and was just like, oh, Mayfield homered again. Yeah, it seems like he's been homering every day. I think it's just because it's so surprising when he does it that you remember every single time he does it.
Okay. Maybe it's also just the fact that, like there's times when I've earlier in the season, like needed him to do something when he was kind of like pinch hitting or not pinch hitting, but like when he was like in the back end, and he made some Angels stacks kind of fit a little bit easier. When Ohtani was like, 6,500, I guess he's still kind of 6K plus, but yeah, the dude just is homered back-to-back games here now, 6 total homers. We'll be back in the 8-9 hole again here. Adam Eaton, I promise you, I'm not rostering Adam Eaton today, so don't worry about that. I knew you were worried about me there for a while, but looking at the rest of this lineup, what are you kind of looking at doing to be able to stack them up? Because it is a difficult team for me to figure out what to do with.
Yeah, it does depend also on what the lineup ends up looking like. Like, for example, if Phil Gosselin's hitting 5th, I think it's a much less appealing lineup than if Joe Adell is hitting 5th. Not that Joe Adell is a great hitter at this point in his career, but he's got tons of power, whereas Phil Gosselin is just not very good at all. Cue the 3 home runs from Phil Gosselin today. But it's an okay spot against Howard. We do have the Angels projected to go a little bit under-owned. The issue is that Howard's not likely to get ownership, and there are still several teams that are projected to go under-owned that have higher chances of success than the Angels. We already talked about Boston. We'll talk about San Francisco. We'll talk about Philadelphia as well. So I think that right now it just kind of looks like a middle of the pack spot for the Angels, although I do really love Ohtani, and I do think Upton and Max Stassi provide some nice value.
Agreed. And looking at the other side, Texas Rangers, 4.5 implied run totals. It's kind of run of the mill here on this slate, actually a little bit more on the bottom end, because we do have Coors, we do have, both teams in that Red Sox and Detroit game that look pretty decent, and the Angels on the other side, 4.6. But God, they're a bad baseball team. The back half of this lineup is complete dust. Eli White got scratched yesterday. We'll see if he's back in there, but I don't think it really matters to me. I don't want to play him. Anything you're looking at doing with this Rangers team? Because right now, looking at the top stacks tool, they are the 3rd worst team in terms of top stack percentage, but they are the top value stack. You can kind of play them, and it becomes easier to jam in the likes of Nola and Wood together over and over and over again if you really want to be doing such things. There's not a lot of leverage to be had here, but we know Adolis Garcia has a bunch of power. Jonah Heim is always viable under 3K as a catcher play, but anything else you really want to be doing with this team?
They're pretty similar to what I was saying about the Tigers. There's just so many like comparisons between the, Bundy and Perez and the Tigers and the Rangers here. Right now, like with Bundy getting 34% ownership, I like Texas because in terms of just looking at Texas, their ownership is in line with their top stack percentage. So they're not really going over-owned. They're not going under-owned. They do offer value. But if Dylan Bundy, let's, again, just for the sake of argument, assume the current ownership projections are correct. If Dylan Bundy's going to be owned by 1/3 of the field, I like taking, being overweight on Texas and just trying to beat 1/3 of the field real quick with, a good game from the Rangers offense. If Bundy's ownership continues to come down and you do kind of lose that leverage, I think that Nate Lowe, Adolis Garcia, Jonah Heim, assuming they're batting, 2, 3, 4 or whatever, assuming they're all in the lineup and in the middle of it, I think those 3 look like reasonable options because they are cheap. Bundy's had issues with power. Nate Lowe, a 192 expected ISO against right-handed pitching since 2019. Garcia, 247 plate appearances, 218 expected ISO. And then Jonah Heim with a 161 expected ISO. Not bad for a really inexpensive catcher. So I still kind of like that mini stack for value and some upside. But most of my interest in Texas will depend on exactly how much ownership Bundy's projected to get.
Anything else you really want to cover here?
No.
Okay, that's lovely. Going to Chicago Cubs plus 151 at Colorado, 11 total runs. So let's talk Coors. Actually, you know what? Before we talk Coors Field, before we do that, let's just talk about the YouTube channels. Because again, we're all hanging out here in the morning. I know you guys are craving fantasy football content. It just is what it is. It's that time of the season. Again, Hall of Fame game tonight, free projections for that. Be checking that out. But we have 2 new channels here on YouTube. And I know you've probably heard other hosts talk about these, but they are truly going to be at the forefront of everything that we're doing going forward for our fantasy football coverage. We have the Awesemo fantasy football channel. We also have the Awesemo odds channel where we're going to be able to cover all the sports betting stuff that you guys are craving as well. we are going back and forth. We're putting up videos, the breakfast menu with Josh and with Ben. We've had some different rotating guests here as Josh has been hanging out on vacation in Asheville. Good times. I wish I was there, but I'd suggest that you be checking out all the content coming out there, because I know DFS is kind of where we all are centered at. That's why we're here hanging out every single day. That's what we're centered on. But I promise you, adding sports betting to your repertoire, adding it into your coverage, into your daily allotment of sports betting, it is truly going to be something that allows for you to build a bankroll. It will allow you to sustain a bankroll. It's going to be something that in the long run, with the guys that we have in Lofty and Matt Gajewski and everybody else for the fantasy football stuff, as well as the football betting, you're not going to find anything better in the entire industry. So check out those videos. For all the hosts, hit the like button, subscribe button, notification bell. And if you could, one Jordan Klein, the super producer that he is, if you could put into YouTube chat the links for both the Awesemo Fantasy Football and Odds channel, definitely click subscribe. Just subscribe to those so you know when they're going live. If you don't want to check out the videos, that given day, sweet. But I guarantee you, as it gets closer here in the next month, you're going to be wanting to check out those videos. They become more and more relevant here. I know you'll get into your year-long stuff if you're diving into best ball. This is the opportunity right now to get in, to be able to be prepared when week one comes, because it will be here before you know it. So start preparing now, hit those like buttons, and thank you so much for being part of this Awesemo community. All right, now let's talk Coors Field. This will be a fun talking point. Chicago Cubs, again, plus 151 at Colorado, 11 total runs in this one, your largest total on both sides. The prices continue to just be completely out of whack here, specifically on the Cubs side, where Ortega's still probably going to be leading off against Antonio Senzatella, who is coming in here off of being hurt. And, it's or beyond the COVID-19 list, should I say, is the right way of saying it. He hasn't played here for a hot second and not a great pitcher altogether here, but I guess we should talk pitching. Jake Arrieta, Antonio Senzatella, they're at least cheap. If you're looking for pivots off Bundy, maybe going their direction. Arrieta, the lowest top two pitcher percentage, but any viability, like we could look at a John Gray type punt here with Senzatella today.
Yeah, just because, and I think you can do it with either of these guys. I think Arrieta's top two pitcher percentage comes up. I don't understand why he'd be sub 1%, while Senzatella's 14.5. But either way, for both of these pitchers, really, you can make the game theory argument for them, because both of these teams are likely to get a ton of ownership, more ownership than they most likely deserve, even though they are the two best offenses in terms of top stack percentage. They're getting way more ownership than other teams that have similar chances of success. So it's more so you're just saying, like, I know neither pitcher is very good, but neither offense is very good either. And the pitchers, can just get lucky, have some balls hit at people. It does look like it's supposed to be warm in Colorado, which makes this game more appealing for offenses than some of the recent games that we've seen there. But again, it goes back to the larger field, the larger the tournament you're playing, the more willing you should be to take chances, especially on a slate like this, where none of the cheap pitchers inspire a lot of confidence. Like, is Dylan Bundy likely to do better than one of the Coors Field pitchers? Yes. Is Martin Perez in a better spot? Yes. But there's massive question marks with all of these guys. So when you have to go to that price range for pitching, it just does make sense in larger field stuff to be willing to roll the dice on someone like Senzatella, and just hope that he beats Martin Perez, which isn't always a difficult thing to do.
Somebody earlier said, I can't remember who it was in chat, but they said that Coors Field on the slate, not a good thing. I love having short slates with Coors Field on it. How about you?
I mean, I like it. I understand what you're saying. I do like it because if the game fails, it's really, really easy to win those slates. I hate it because it's just like nothing you like. If Coors Field hits its run total, you're just not going to win, assuming that like you take the same approach that I do and that you seem to, where, you're just underweight on those guys. Like, so I hate, it's just like when, like the Yankees are in a great spot against the Orioles. It's like, I love it because I love when 30% of the field is rostering the same hitters, but it's also just such a good spot that it's not always the most fun.
But I specifically like it for short slates because something like yesterday, they didn't end up with as much ownership as what I was expecting them to. And it was an 11 gamer. You still have to kind of identify those other teams that go off. Whereas if it ends up being a 3-2 game here on a short slate, you can go just about anywhere and probably get leverage on that game.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Like you're less likely to miss on who you play because there's, just fewer teams.
Yeah, you don't have to do something ridiculous like, stack up. Oh, God, I don't even know where yesterday went wrong. I had all the Dodgers. I had all the Erod. MLB DFS. Good times. Thank you so much. Oh, I know what the Yankees continue to do stupid things, and they will continue to do stupid things going forward. I'm assuming is probably the reasoning for my losses yesterday, but I digress. We're back here to baseball. We've covered both pitchers. There's really nothing to say other than you can punt them for the sake of punting them. I do expect that Arrieta top pitcher percentage to go up here as well slightly. Senzatella, I think I'd probably be rather going to. Do you have a priority on which one you would prioritize between Arrieta and Senzatella?
I think I'd go to Senzatella first, just because the Cubs do have an implied run total more than a run lower than the Rockies. So, and it's something I mentioned before too. I mentioned it with Gray, mentioned it with Freeland. I just kind of always feel a little bit better going to the Rockies pitcher in cores than the opposing pitcher, especially when it's an opposing pitcher who isn't any good like Arrieta, because at least like the numbers that you're looking at for the Rockies pitcher, he's pitching give or take half of his games there for the season. He's used to pitching there. He is aware of everything that goes into pitching there. So I always just feel a little bit better going to the Rockies guy anyway.
I've been playing MLB DFS for 6 years. I've never even thought about that where, it's awareness. Your home stadium, you probably have a little bit more awareness going in there than you do any other ballpark. Well, you absolutely should. But that's neither here nor there. It has more to do with just Coors Field is Coors Field, and we all understand the ramifications of pitching in it. And that means we should probably look at rostering a couple of hitters here or there. I just will not be stacking up either of these teams on a day like today. And I know Colorado coming in with the top stack percentage right now over on DK 20%, but the ownership gets nearly 30% there. It's just so difficult to get there. And then the Cubs, 15.5%, 20.7% ownership share. So nearly 50% of the total ownership, but only a 35% top stack percentage for these two teams. Are you still going to have some stacks of these two teams in your 150? And then if you're playing 150, I don't want to assume that, but it's just, what are you going to be doing with these teams in terms of stacking? Or are you going to try to figure out a way to get a little bit different in utilizing hitters from this game?
Yeah, I mean, with there only being 10 teams on the slate, I assume I'll have more than 0 full stacks of them. But I also am very confident I'll be underweight. But it's the same kind of thing that we've talked about, when the Yankees play recently, when we've had some other really popular but really good spots. I still get to the hitters a decent amount, and it's just that I mix them in with lower owned pitching, lower owned stacks. Like if I have a stack that is getting 3-4% ownership, I don't mind mixing in 1 or 2 popular hitters with them. It's just not a big deal, especially when these guys do offer value. They're going to let me get to pitching that I want. But in terms of full stacks, I fully expect to be underweight on the field. And then the one other thing to mention, though, is also, we're talking about this in light of tournaments. If you're someone watching this show and you're playing cash games, definitely don't be shying away from this game. Like, yes, you're going to want hitters pretty much everywhere from this game. So it does drastically depend what formats, what contests you're playing. But, talking specifically about tournaments, I just won't be anywhere near the field on these teams.
I was just screwing around a little bit this morning, trying to put together a cash lineup, and it's so easy to play Nola Wood and then just jam in this game. So do that is probably what I'm guessing I would do, but we'll get to those pitchers here in a second. I think that those are going to be your two arms, and it looks like our top pitchers tool agrees with that. I don't think it's too difficult to make that work. But on the Cubs side here, I guess I pulled up DraftKings here, or I pulled up the Fantasy Crunch here, and I'm looking at the ownership of some of these hitters, and we don't have any of the official lineups here yet, but it looks like Hayward and Duffy are coming in underneath 12%. And they're the only two batters from this entire game that kind of have that lower ownership. Is there a batter that you cannot do without from either side of this game?
No.
Okay. There you go. And
no, I mean, like Trevor Story is good, but he's actually appropriately priced. Tapia is probably a little underpriced. Ortega is definitely underpriced, but I can still do without Rafael Ortega as long as he doesn't hit 3 home runs again. I think Ian Happ's going a little bit underowned at 20% relative to some of these other Cubs. One other thing to mention, the ownership isn't quite as high on FanDuel, so I'm guessing the pricing is just a little bit better there. But looking at the top stack tool on FanDuel, we have the Rockies with a 31% chance of being the top stack, getting 30% ownership. Cubs with a 22% chance of being the top stack, getting 19% ownership. So I do think you should, if you do want to stack these teams up, it's better to be doing it on FanDuel than DraftKings.
The one thing about that too, though, is that you have the slates are split up. So it's 3 and 3 games. And so it becomes a little bit more nuanced there. But yeah, I agree with you. That would probably be where you want to go do it. That will be on the, what is it? It's not the very early slate. It's just the early slate or, oh man, I can't even with these 3 gamer split ups. I like the way the DK does it, where they at least incorporate all of the afternoon games, as long as there's a game starting up at 10:10 here. And by the way, the live before lock, it is truly because I guess we got to talk about the very early game. I completely missed on seeing that Mets and Miami game. If anybody's playing on FanDuel, we should probably go and cover that here at the very end. Jordan, we'll put that at the bottom of the line. I'll send that to you here as well. I didn't even notice that game was included here on the very early slate. That locks in 33 minutes. So yeah, that's the Mets in Miami, Boston, Detroit, and Angels in Texas. Those are only 3 games from that session. We'll cover that here at the very end. Gives us one more thing to talk about. Put some more time into the show. That's great. But anything else here from Coors Field? Obviously an important talking point.
No, I think it's just it's pretty straightforward, I think, because both teams are pretty bad offensively, but it is really, really good hitting conditions. It is 2 pitchers that neither one are very good. So it's just, they project as a lot of the best point per dollar plays. Definitely should be getting to them in cash. And then in tournaments, again, it's just, you're not really trying to guess every single slate. You're like, oh, is this overowned team going to do well? It's more so you just have to look over the course of the entire season and say, if I'm consistently avoiding the spots where, yes, it's a good spot, but the ownership is going too far. There's too much ownership going to these hitters. If I avoid that over the course of an entire season, I'm going to make money. And you kind of just, especially in baseball, because there is so much volatility, you have to just kind of stay out of your head, stay out of your own head, and just accept that there's going to be days where, Coors Field goes off and you just get destroyed.
Yeah, I'm having one of those days for 2 weeks. It's been enjoyable. Really having a lot of fun here. It's going to bounce around. That's what I'm telling myself. Here we go. San Francisco Giants -163 at Arizona, 9 total runs here in this one. Alex Wood and Merrill Kelly, both very serviceable pitchers here, specifically Alex Wood here. The lefty, once upon a time Dodger, been pretty decent here. Just continues to do his thing. 25% K percentage, 378 expected slugging, 230 expected batting average. And you get this garbage Arizona Diamondbacks team. Great spot, sets up really nicely. I really like 9,600. I don't think it's that hard to pair him with Nola. I'm probably going to be doing that. Well, I'm for sure going to be doing that in cash. But Alex Wood, how are you handling him today?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good spot. He's a little bit more expensive than I would like, but given the pitching options on this slate, I think it's deserved. Arizona is just not a very good lineup. They don't have Escobar anymore either, which makes it an even weaker lineup. Alex Wood has been a solid pitcher this season. He's struck out 25.2% of hitters, 3.65 xFIP, 1.09 home runs per 9 is fine. Walk rate is fine. He's just one of the best pitchers on this early slate. He's got the second highest top 2 pitcher percentage. He's getting 40% ownership, which I think is deserved. So yeah, I'll be going to Wood, and I think, just differentiating with bats a bit.
All righty. And on the other side, Merrill Kelly, it's been Merrill Kelly. It's still Merrill Kelly. I mean, no Ks. You're not getting your strikeouts. 20.5% K percentage limits the walks. I do say, I mean, there's not many places to pivot. You have 10 total pitchers here on this slate. Looking at the top pitchers percentage, 23%. So he's basically tied there with Skubal. And I gotta say, I would much rather target the San Francisco Giants team, especially depending on the way that lineup comes out, than be targeting the Boston Red Sox for sure. But the Ks aren't there whatsoever. At least the ownership's 11%. Merrill Kelly might be kind of a tournament guy to be going to. How about you? What do you think about him?
Yeah, I agree. And it's not because I like Merrill Kelly. He's another one of these guys. It's kind of like Martin Perez that I typically just don't roster because the strikeout numbers aren't there. But on bigger slates, there's more alternatives, and you can go to guys that have strikeouts. On this slate, there's not really those alternatives. Like the only mid-range guy that you can really look to for strikeouts today is Skubal, and we've already talked about how tough that matchup is. I guess you can make the case for Joe Ross too, and we'll get there in the last game. But it more just comes down to the ownership, where Merrill Kelly's right now projected for 11% ownership. He's $900 more than Skubal, but he probably shouldn't be getting more than double the ownership when they have identical top two pitcher percentages. The Giants do have a 5.1 implied run total. They are a good offense, but we also need to wait and see what this lineup looks like, because Mike Yastrzemski was a late scratch yesterday with hamstring tightness. Brandon Belt could be back from the IL today. Gabe Kapler had said this morning that he expects Belt to be activated. If Brandon Belt's back, that makes this lineup more difficult as well. But it kind of just goes back to, again, you're not talking about Merrill Kelly in cash games or anything like that. So you don't really care so much about what his medium projection is. And, is Yastrzemski in, is Belt in? It's more so, even if it's a tough matchup, Merrill Kelly's still going to have a good start, let's say 1 out of 5 times, and he's just not getting much ownership. So I do think that is one spot that you can be a little bit overweight on Kelly in tournaments, even though I also like the Giants side of this game.
Somebody said in chat, James Malloy was watching the Live Before Lock show last night, and someone recommended the lefties from Toronto, and that gave me the ability to get a lineup that got a takedown last night. That a boy. Way to go, James. Congrats on that, my dude. Was that you who recommended such things?
Yeah, I mean, I recommended Toronto in general. I think I said that you wanted lefties from Toronto, but that most of their lefties suck, because there was like Brevik Valera and Reese McGuire. But
Corey Dickerson. Put some respect on the name.
Yeah. But yeah, I think everybody yesterday, at least me and Greg did a show together. We were both high on Toronto. Aton liked Toronto. I didn't see what you guys did on Live Before Lock.
I wasn't on Live Before Lock thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably why I lost, if I had to guess. That was me. I did play a lot of Toronto. I was doing well in the $44 queue on FanDuel until I wasn't. I love baseball. Again, the best.
Changes so quickly. It's such a stressful sweat.
Well, I mean, it was one of those things too, where I got 8 runs from Toronto in the first inning, and I had Springer, and I had all the right pieces all together. And then I had a Dodger stack on the other side, but I had 2 blatant zeros and Justin Turner and Ketel Marte in the lineup that I needed to have go off. And that's the difference between $100 and live final. And yeah. I do not enjoy that sweat whatsoever. Alex Dickerson.
You get so much false hope, because you look at a team and you're like, oh, like this stack is still alive if they hit 3 home runs. But then at the same time, when you're winning, you're just going back looking at these teams like, oh, there's a stack here, 20 points back. Now I need to wait 45 minutes for them to come to bat again. It's like it's such a weird sweat. Like, basketball is at least like constant. Like golf, you have an idea when the people are going to tee off. Football, you can just watch. You at least know when your team has the ball and stuff. Like baseball, it's just like, oh yeah, they can score 100 points in 2 minutes.
It's unbelievable. I tell you what, I think I enjoy the baseball sweat the absolute most, though, because the ability, NFL as well, where you just have that crazy ability to catch something out of the middle of nowhere. You catch lightning in a bottle in the 8th inning and you win a tournament, as opposed to, I don't know, win $10.
Right. Yeah. Like last night I was telling you before the show, like I had a giant stack as one of my main lineups.
Yeah.
And I went to bed just being like, okay, I'm losing several $1,000s. Like this slate sucked. And then I happened to look at my phone before I fell asleep, and I'm like, oh, I'm winning several $1,000s. Like what happened? And it's like, oh, the Giants just lit up the Diamondbacks bullpen in the 7th inning or something.
Yeah. It was like Posey finally got involved, and then Dickerson hit the bomb. I had that game on alongside the Max Scherzer game, which again, I cannot believe I did not go to that game. I'm so disappointed in myself as a person, because that would have been a lot of fun. It was rocking there in Dodger Stadium. And, as much as the fans can be crazy at Dodger Stadium, just as people, it is an amazing environment for a baseball game. They are passionate, they are fun, and Max is going to fit in really, really well with that team. What a scary, stupid, creative team that is. It's just fake. But San Francisco Giants, looking at the hitters here, again, this is your NL West showdown between them and the Dodgers here right now, especially so long as Tatis is out. But Lamonte Wade, Chris Bryant here at the top end, I'm assuming we're going to get him back in there. Mike Yastrzemski, we're going to have to kind of wait to see. He's got the Q tag. Brandon Belt is in the projected lineup here at a couple of sites that I'm looking at as well. That would be an interesting bat for them to get back and would make it a little bit more viable. And he's only 2.5K over on FanDuel today. So want to just throw that out there. 5.4K on DK. Probably play him on FanDuel is my guess. But what are you really planning to do with this Giants team?
Yeah, I mean, they're projected to go a little bit under owned right now. They have the fourth highest top stack percentage, getting around 10% ownership. I think they look pretty good here because Merrill Kelly, he's not a bad pitcher, but he's certainly not someone that I'm shying away from. He's allowed a 160 expected ISO to righties this year, 135 to lefties. Does a pretty good job limiting power, but you just have good hitters in this lineup. Even if Yastrzemski's out, I assume that becomes Alex Dickerson, which that's still a guy that has power. Wade has hit really well this year. Bryant's good. Posey's back to hitting this year after taking last year off. Belt's a very good hitter. Crawford's having a resurgent year. It's just a really deep lineup, kind of regardless of who is in there. So I want to get back to the Giants here. And then one other thing, and I had kind of said yesterday on the show, I didn't understand. I've said it twice now when Zach Gallen pitches. Like the implied run totals against him have been a lot higher than I feel like they should be. I remembered realized why that would be the case when the Diamondbacks bullpen came in and just got absolutely lit up. Gallen had a pretty decent start, and then the Giants still ended up being one of the best stacks last night. So this is one of those teams where teams not in contention that don't have any reason to have good arms in their bullpen. Basically, you can add on some runs late in the game against these guys too.
My favorite thing to throw out there about the Giants, and I asked you this again. Well, we'll see if you can remember if you don't have it pulled up. What is the San Francisco Giants ISO against righties this year?
I don't remember the number. I know it's high.
204.
Yeah, which is really impressive when you keep in mind that ISO is not based, like it doesn't factor in where you're hitting. So having an ISO that high when you're playing half of your games in whatever they're calling Oracle, AT&T, whatever it is now,
ballpark by the bay.
Yeah, is crazy impressive.
It's just outrageous. And I know that they brought the fences in a little bit, but it is still not a great hitter's ballpark whatsoever. It's they K a lot, 25.8% as well. So there's definitely Ks to be involved for Merrill Kelly. But on the other side of it, this sticks out to me as an easy play both sides of it and kind of like limit your exposure more to Coors. And I think that that's probably going to be a path that I take where I get to quite a bit of Giant stacks and I get to quite a bit of Merrill Kelly, just so long as that ownership stays where it is. I would be really upset to see a 25% or 30% owned Merrill Kelly come down to the lock. And then, having the best hitter, the best hitting team against righties in an upgrade of a ballpark. Even I know the humidor is still a thing there in Arizona, but it's still much, much better than the fake, the ballpark by the bay. I think that that's a fun name. They can pay me for the rights for that, by the way. Ketel Marte going to probably be on the leadoff spot here. I'm very upset with him. Nick Ahmed projected to be in the 2-hole here. This lineup actually looks a little bit better. Drew Ellis was a guy that got called up here. He was in the 4-hole. He had a pretty good year at AAA. I'm not sure if he'll be batting cleanup again. That was kind of absurd, but he is 2K. Same with the projected second baseman, Jake Hager. But we will look at the rest of this lineup once it comes out. What are you kind of seeing from Arizona going up against Alex Wood? Because there's definitely some leverage to be had there.
Yeah, still not seeing too much. Like you can always make the case on these smaller slates where a pitcher is pulling 40% ownership. It's still baseball. The Diamondbacks can still do well. I mean, you literally just have to look back to last night where the Kansas City Royals won an 11-game slate against Lucas Giolito. It happens. And obviously it's more likely to happen when they only have to beat 9 other teams instead of 21. But still a really low probability spot. Second lowest top stack percentage on the slate, only ahead of the Nats against Aaron Nola. It's like you said, it's not a completely terrible lineup. Like you've at least heard of the hitters in this lineup. Ketel Marte is fine. Nick Ahmed's fine. Cabrera, Kelly, Calhoun, Walker. Those guys are all okay. Drew Ellis, not really a prospect, 35th in Arizona system, but does have some power. It's a bad lineup, but it's at least still like a major league lineup. So yeah, I mean, the largest field tournaments, I can understand why you would get some Arizona just to try and knock 40% of the field out against Alex Wood. But in smaller field stuff, they're just not anywhere close to what I'm getting to.
If you had to pick a hitter out of it, who are you picking one off?
Probably either Marte at 3,800 or Walker at 2,500.
Okay. Yeah. Walker makes some sense there. 2,500 is a pretty good price for him over on DK here. All right. We got one game left on the DK slate. We'll wrap back around. We'll talk about that Miami and Mets game as well. For anybody playing on FanDuel, I guess that would be more of the emphasis of the live before lock because it will lock right there at 9:10 West Coast time. So 12:10 out there on the East Coast for you. But before we get to this final game for the DK slate, Awesemo Plus tools are the best tools in the DFS industry. If you've been behind the paywall, you already know that. If you're checking out the free content every day, you already know that. There's no question about it. Right now, the weekly pass is $29.95, and it includes full access to all of the premium content that we have. We're going to be having tons of preseason NFL coverage. And I'm telling you, that is such a great ROI sport. All I do is go into my Roto Tracker, take a look at it, see a positive number in the column there. And it's unbelievable how easy it is. And I don't play that much volume for the preseason because there's definitely some risk that can be involved. I'm probably going to up it this year because we have such amazing minds in Makajewski that are making projections for it right now. We have guys like Adam Scherer over here who, I can DM and ask him questions. You should all DM him in the premium Slack too. He would love that and to get back and forth. Actually DM me. I will take that pressure off of him. But I'm telling you, we have guys that are just always there to help. We are so helpful trying to be in the premium Slack to talk with you guys as well. $29.95 gets you behind the paywall for such things. The premium Slack channel, lineup builder, and so much more. And if you're a user of Awesemo Plus Platinum right now, take advantage of the promo code that's up on the screen here. MLB Live Before Lock, all caps, one word. That's MLB Live Before Lock. Use it for 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And of course, if you're only looking to be playing MLB DFS, that's what you're here to listen to, then you can sign up for the MLB weekly package for only $15.95. So half the cost, but for a little bit more, MMA, preseason NFL, high ROI sports, stuff where not as much information is readily available. These things like the top fighters tool, the things like the projections we have for the preseason game today, those are going to be what give you an edge. So be checking that out. Stop guessing, start winning, and join Awesemo Plus today. All right. Philadelphia minus 146 at Washington, 8.5 runs here. Let's talk pitching. Aaron Nola, Joe Ross. Let's start with Aaron Nola because he's coming in highest top pitcher percentage, rightfully so, going up against a watered down Washington team that has a bunch of dudes that I didn't know until last week. So that's cool. Talk to me about Aaron Nola.
Yeah, obviously, I think the best spot on the slate. Actually kind of surprised Washington's had a 3.9 implied run total. That just seems higher than I would expect. Nola has struggled outside of Philadelphia for several years now. I don't want to put too much stock into that because it doesn't make a ton of sense considering that Citizens Bank is a favorable park for hitters. But there is something to be said for some pitchers just, on their home mound, being comfortable with, every mound's a little bit different and just being comfortable there and all of that. So it is worth noting at least that Nola has had some issues outside of Philadelphia for years now, but it is still essentially a AAA Nationals team plus Juan Soto and Josh Bell basically is what this team is. Aaron Nola has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 28.8%, 23.8% K-minus BB percentage, leads all pitchers who are pitching today, 3.45 xFIP, 1.34 home runs per nine. I mean, he does give up some power. So if you were looking to leverage against him, I think that you can go to guys like Josh Bell and Juan Soto and hope to run into a home run there. But Nola, I think, is obviously the best pitcher on the slate, and I don't think it's really close.
It is definitely not close. Feel much more secure going to him than anybody else. Highest floor, highest ceiling combination. It's hard for me to get away from him. I'm going to make 4 main lineups here for the early slate, and he will be in all 4. I don't think that there's going to be any question on it. On FanDuel, so we got to at least touch on the conversation here for FanDuel. Looking at the FanDuel early slate is kind of where he's positioned at. Only a 29% top pitcher percentage, 30% ownership. Your other pitchers in that contest, Alex Wood, Merrill Kelly, Joe Ross, Antonio Senzatella, and Jake Arrieta. Is there anybody that you would want to possibly be pivoting to on FanDuel? I mean, it's drastic differences, $2,100 difference between him and Wood there. Is there kind of a lean you would have on how to handle Nola on FanDuel for those people?
So I think, it really is going to come down to what bats you can get, since there is such a big price difference between Nola and Wood. I do think that just looking at the ownership and the chances of success for those two and ignoring salary, I would rather get to Nola if I can, as long as I don't have to sacrifice too much a hitter. If you're looking to get away from those two because they're pulling 70+% of projected ownership, then I think you're back to Merrill Kelly and Joe Ross, which, again, we haven't talked about Ross yet, but, talked about Kelly. It's not that you really like him. It's just that he's good enough. He can, have a good game here, and he's only getting 10% ownership.
Yeah, and Joe Ross has had some decent outings here of late. He limits the hard contact, 87.3 mile per hour exit velocity here, average on the season. That's a great mark. 37.4% hard hit percentage. 403 expected slugging ain't great, but 24% K percentage, a little bit better than Merrill Kelly on this side. This Phillies team, though, I don't love picking on it as much here. I mean, there are Ks to be had here between Rhys Hoskins, Alec Boehm, We'll see. Let me double check what that lineup came out as. So we don't have it yet, so that's not helpful. But I'm assuming Jankowski is going to be in there. He's been leading off here against right-handed pitching, and just looking at that, only a 17.8% K percentage. That's not as good. We'll see if Brad Miller ends up in there. It kind of, for me, fluctuates a lot based on how this Phillies lineup comes out. But Joe Ross, what do you think about him today?
I like him in tournaments just because he's not getting ownership and he does have pretty good strikeout stuff. For the season, his strikeout percentage is like 1 point lower than Alex Wood's at 24.3%, 4.13 xFIP, 1.49 home runs per nine. It's not that he's a great pitcher or is safe by any stretch, but he does at least have strikeout stuff. He strikes out a lot more hitters than Merrill Kelly does, for example. And on DraftKings right now, Ross is only projected for about 9% ownership with a 22% chance of being a top two pitcher. So he's actually the guy between Kelly and Ross. I do slightly prefer pivoting to Ross because he is projected to be a little bit lower owned, and he does have better strikeout stuff. But like you were saying, this Phillies lineup also will play a factor be a factor because you do have Hoskins back. McCutchen is still out, but Realmuto sat yesterday, so he should be back in the lineup as well, which makes it more dangerous. It's definitely not a safe spot for Joe Ross, but I do think he's got the most strikeout upside out of any pitcher that is not getting ownership right now.
Every single game, every single ballpark over 80 degrees here. Obviously, they'll have the roof closed in the afternoon in Arizona, so we don't have to think about that, but 80 degrees in Detroit. 90 degrees in Texas right now. The roof is open. It looks like maybe that'll change here leading up to it. Double check that at 11:05 out here on the West Coast, 2:05 there on the East Coast. 90 plus degrees there in Coors. What a fun fade that will be. And 83 degrees here in Washington. It's going to be some interesting stuff here looking at it. But yeah, on the Phillies side here, Bryce Harper, 6K. At least you're paying a premium for some of these guys. I think that should be limiting some of their ownership. Right now, 10% top stack potential, but only 6% ownership. That's probably going to make me get to some of them. You're going to have to combine them with some cheap pitching. If you're going to play Nola and X pitcher, you'll probably have an uncomfortable build. But Bryce Harper kind of sticks out for me there. Let's talk Washington. You just covered the Phillies really well. Washington, Alcides Escobar projected to be at the top of the lineup. Gross. Let's see. Juan Soto, Josh Bell. You can always play that two-man in tournaments, but against Aaron Nola, I mean, is there anybody on Washington you'd be willing to roll out there?
So I actually, like, if you're looking to go leverage stacks against either Wood or Nola, I actually prefer going to the Nats here because they're projected for less ownership than the Diamondbacks. They have very, very similar top stack percentages, but less ownership than the Diamondbacks. And then Nola's projected for more ownership than Alex Wood. So again, it's a low probability spot. And I would be doing this in large field tournaments, not, single entry or three max. But I do think that they look a little bit better than Arizona does for those reasons. And then I mentioned before Aaron Nola's, home road splits. Going back to the start of the 2019 season, Nola has thrown 213 and 2/3 innings at home. He's struck out 31% of hitters, 1 home run per 9 innings, 3.25 xFIP. Looking over that same period of time on the road, 181 and a third innings pitched, 25.9% strikeout percentage, so about 5 points lower than at home, 3.84 xFIP, so like half a run higher, and 1.5 home runs per 9, so an extra half home run per 9 innings. Again, he's been good. You're not expecting the Nats to beat Aaron Nola here, but we have seen that drop off for him. He is getting a ton of ownership. It is supposed to be relatively warm in Washington, and they are a pretty cheap team. So like you could still get to, Alex Wood plus Ross or Wood plus Kelly or whatever you want to do. So very low probability spot, but I do think the lack of ownership on the Nats and the massive ownership on Nola makes them a pretty intriguing stack in your largest field stuff.
Yeah, and Yadier Hernandez actually decent enough numbers here in limited sample size. I mean, he's not going to contend with anything Josh Bell and Soto are doing here, but he's been decent enough. I think that's actually a really sharp take. Not that I'm surprised that you had a sharp take, but I definitely think going to Washington bats as opposed to going to some Arizona bats is probably the right way to go. I think better class of hitters. And for sure, you got two guys in Bell and Soto who can do some major damage against any pitcher in all of Major League Baseball for sure. But anything else here to cover in this game?
Nope.
All right. And also, we got a super chat here, $5 from Justin Bruce. He said, just tested positive for COVID. Dude, best of luck to you. Sorry about that. That's shitty, but looks like all I'll be doing is listening to Awesemo winning all the monies. That sounds great. So we're going to try to help you out with that for sure. Hopefully you're rested up, get well soon. Not fun stuff for sure, but thank you so much for the super chat. And thank you for spending your morning with us. We'll try to take care of you for the next couple of weeks as you're hanging out. But let's see. Last game we're going to cover here, FanDuel. Again, I said we go wrap back around to it, but Mets at Miami here. We've got Rich Hill on one side, Braxton Garrett on the other. I think Rich Hill, probably the intriguing talking point here. Looking at the FanDuel early, I guess it's the super early slate here that we're going to here. I can't even find it right now, but that's fine. Rich Hill, somebody who's been overachieving here for the last, I don't know, however long. It's pretty crazy. He ends up getting traded, and I don't know. For me, what comes down to Rich Hill is that if you have the most analytically driven team in the Tampa Bay Rays and they're happy to part with you, probably good reason for it. But against Miami, it's probably viable to be targeting absolutely anybody. How do you feel about Rich Hill today?
Yeah, and he's relatively inexpensive at 7,400. The issue you run into with Hill on FanDuel is that he doesn't typically go deep into games. So you're asking a lot for him to get a quality start for you. He's gone 6 innings once in like his last 10 games, whatever's showing up on his FanDuel game logs at the top. So that's a pretty tough ask, but it is a really small slate. It is a really good matchup. So I think he's more appealing here than he normally would be.
All right. And on the other side here, I have no desire whatsoever to be going to this Braxton fellow. How about you?
I think he's actually decent. I'm pulling his stuff back up now. I know he pitched the other day and had a good start. 54 and 2/3 innings in 11 starts at AAA this year. 23.3% strikeout percentage. He's made 4 starts in the majors, 5 total appearances, 20.2% strikeout percentage. Yeah, I mean, Fangraphs has him as the Marlins' 33rd pitching prospect, so he's not particularly highly regarded. He is only 5,700, but probably not really necessary here outside of like the largest field tournaments.
All right. Looking at bats, then at least on the Mets side, we kind of know the usual suspect. VR back in there on the lead up spot. He's got 3 positions that he is eligible for over on FanDuel: second base, third base, shortstop. That's very viable at 2.8K. Peter Alonso, we know the kind of power he has. Dom Smith, power up against, left on left hitting in the 3-hole. That's kind of interesting. JD Davis in the 4-hole. I always like throwing him into the middle of it. Baez, boom or bust option always. Can definitely go yard here in this spot. Doesn't matter the ballpark. And James McCann, an interesting catcher spot. I think this would be a fun team to kind of be stacking up if we could use them on DK in that early slate, but I digress. We do not have them. Mets, how would you handle them over on this FanDuel slate?
Yeah, I think it's an okay spot. The park isn't great, and Garrett, has seemed good enough. Like, he doesn't seem like a total gas can, but you do have the power speed combo in VR, which is nice. Peter Alonso and JD Davis both have tons of power. Baez swings at everything, and when he does hit it, he has power and speed as well. So I think it is a pretty high upside spot. I like the $2,200 salary on McCann as well. Okay.
And then Miami, they're the only team on this 3-game slate here, underneath a 4 total implied total, but I don't know. It's Miami. This entire lineup, I don't really know what to tell you other than they suck. And Jorge Alfaro is in the 3-hole. Lewis Brinson is in the 4-hole today. Brian Anderson's in the 5-hole. Like, Brian Anderson, a decent enough hitter historically, but what are you doing with Miami in this spot?
Not much of anything. I think Brian Anderson's the one that stands out the most, but just not much interest.
Not much interest whatsoever. All right. And now that will be at lock here in 7 minutes here for FanDuel. But we're going to get ourselves out of here. Hopefully that was kind of covered for you guys for the early slate. That's kind of it. We're going to be back here in the afternoon. Before we close out here, Adam, do you have any final words for the people on this early slate?
No, other than, even more so than normal, as slates get smaller, you should just be more willing to accept volatility and variance, and understand you're going to just have some big losing days, but that the days that you win will be disproportionately bigger than your losses if you consistently take that approach.
Says the guy who makes 50K in an evening. That's a good thing. I would like to join that crew. Best of luck to everybody here in this morning slate. We'll see you guys back here for the deeper dive. It'll be Adam and I once again here, starting up at 5 p.m. Eastern time, 2 p.m. out here on the West Coast. And then coming up after that will be the MLB Live Before Lock show, of course, with Greg and Terry. Looking forward to that. That'll be great. And don't forget also, I will be doing Live Before Lock for the preseason, for the Hall of Fame game, if you will, with Matt Gajewski. Our first show together. Very much looking forward to that. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell on the way out. He's Adam. I'm Eric. Best of luck.